Welcome back. Stop and frisk, obviously a major issue on RFL for a while now, and we feel here is an issue that it demands obviously a lot more attention than it's gotten until the last couple of weeks. As more people who have been stopped and frisked share their stories and more police speak out about the pressure they're under to meet those quotas, momentum against the policy is certainly picking up here. Well, Sunday's silent march against it, it's certainly evidence of that. And today, we heard a response of sorts from the NYPD themselves, although they wouldn't necessarily characterize it that way. The New York Police Department invited reporters for an overview of stop, questioning, frisk training, that's what they call it, complete with role play and an explanation of how a proper, in effect, encounter would go down. Our Kim Langel, who's been covering this from the get-go, she was there and she joins us now with what she found out. Kim?
That's right, Rich. You and everybody else calls it stop and frisk, but today the NYPD called it stop, question, and possibly frisk. They're trying to send the message that community relations are good, even though we're hearing that they're not. Now, the mainstay of the program that they showed us here was what they call role play. They say it's the new part of their training program, and they actually built an entire New York City streetscape for police officers to demonstrate that. They showed it to us today, and they shrunk an entire 8 hours of training into 45 minutes for us specifically. The fundamentals they kept repeating was that people prefer to be asked what to do rather than to be told what to do.
The goal of law enforcement is to generate voluntary compliance, which in plain language means to get people to do what you need them to do while allowing them to believe it's their idea.
In a room full of reporters at a Bronx training center, the NYPD presented what they said is what happens every day on the streets of New York City when officers stop and frisk New Yorkers. Body language, action, tone, and words, according to Detective James Shanahan, is what brings the, quote, right outcome for effective citizen contact during stops and frisks.
The first one you're going to see is a robbery job.
Scenarios like this played out for the cameras. Police are told a robbery just occurred and given a description of two males. Officers see people who fit that description. They stop, frisk, and arrest one.
Nah.
Just because of this interaction, no? Yes?
No. Can I leave?
Yes,
In this scenario, a man is questioned by police. He refuses to give his name and is allowed to leave. Police say the NYPD would go back to the precinct and write up 2 UF-250 forms, even though one man refused to give his name and walked away. UF-250s refer to stop and frisk. Implicit in this scenario is the race of the man who was arrested, a white man, and the man who was allowed to leave, a black man. It doesn't reflect the NYPD statistics that show that 87% of all stops last year happened to blacks and Latinos.
Officers are told that they are not to make any law enforcement decisions based on race and race alone. That does not mean, in given a set of facts and circumstances where we have a victim, we have a complainant who identifies a suspect or a perpetrator by race, we cannot use that racial component in terms of conducting a stop.
The NYPD says training is not new. It's a reinforcement of the training they receive every single year. What's new is the role play. The NYPD constructed this mock New York City streetscape so that the issues discussed in the police academy now have bite. But some say training's not the problem. Some, including former and current law enforcement, say the problem is pressure from the top to stop more and more people.
Officers feel this enormous pressure from headquarters because they're giving them these goal-oriented tasks. They're saying, I want so many numbers. And they're checking them every single day to make sure they hit those targets, is what they call them. But it's really quotas. Officers are consistently being hounded by management for more and more and more numbers.
And audio recordings captured during roll call at the 41st Precinct in the Bronx seem to support the claims that officers are being pressured to make more stops.
I want 250 to see something. I want a ghost town. I want to be able to echo from one end of the street to the other. You understand? That's what I want in a perfect world. So that's your mission. Guys need college, need activity, there you go. So you gotta get me moved.
And if you think 1 in 20 is breaking your guess what you're going to be doing? You're going to do a lot more than what you think.
We asked the NYPD for comment. Commissioner, we've heard from former law enforcement officials, including current police officers, who say the training's not the problem, that the training's actually great. They're saying it's the pressure from the higher-ups being forced to make more and more stops.
I don't know that to be true. My responsibility is to be sure that they are prepared and well-trained to do what they're required to do.
Can you comment on the recordings that have been circulating for the past couple of years?
Recordings, did you say?
Recordings?
Yes. Recordings.
What did you
What recordings?
I mean, there's recordings from, officers that they've collected during roll calls. They've testified in court that they've collected these recordings showing that top commanders are pressuring them to make more and more stops, get more and more 250s, more and more C7s.
I wouldn't know how to respond to a blanket statement like that.
It's not a blanket statement, I mean.
Yeah, I don't know what all those recordings are. I don't know exactly which ones you're referring to.
They're in the class action lawsuit.
Our responsibility here is to be sure that everybody is properly educated and trained and prepared to do what the job assignment is. That's the realm of what we do here.
Doctor.
Now, we left the presentation with these two cards. The larger card here is guidelines for officers on how to be courteous, professional, and respectful. It tells officers to use words like sir, madam, ma'am, say hello and thank you. And this card, this little guy, is what's supposed to be given out to people after they're stopped and frisked. It explains all about what a stop and frisk is. But interestingly enough, in our demonstration, these cards were not given out, and the NYPD could not say how many cards officers carry at any one time. And Rich, I'm sure you're wondering if these demonstrations jived with what we've heard in the street. My answer would be no. Rich.
And I don't think you'd be alone in that. Great job, Kim.